In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Hammer. 40,000. Dawn of War. Game of the Year Edition. For those of you who don't know what a warhammer is, it's death. Death through guns, death through lasers, death through chainsaws, death through crumpin, death through hentai, it's just death. So of course, when I did a challenge run, I initially did a genocide playthrough. It ended up pretty bland by the end, so instead, I'm here to ask and answer a completely different question. Can you beat Warhammer 40K Dawn of War, Deathless? First things first. Davey, this is copyright infringement. Good point. Second thing, Davey, what are the rules? Firstly, none of my units can die. And I should probably clarify, since this game has squad-based infantry, not a single soldier can die. Whether it be a gigantic Predator tank or a singular Imperial guardsman, everything I have access to must live. And since we're playing as the Space Marines in particular, this discludes structures. If this was, say, an Orc challenge, that'd be a tad bit different. But for the Space Marines, we're allowed to lose buildings. Secondly, any units that I don't have control over will not count. This is just a rule set in place for suicidal allies, which are pretty common because the Imperial Guard are a part of this story and also some in-game cutscenes. Lastly, the difficulty will be set on hard. Dawn of War is a campaign that, as far as I can tell on my playthroughs, only affects the enemy's health. There's 50%, there's 100%, and there's 150%. With one exception, every strategy in this video would work on Insane. The only difference is that maps would take 7 or 8 hours instead of 4. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and begin our fun time adventure. The first mission was... well, it's the first mission of an RTS. Gabriel is here, orcs are crumping us, comic antics ensue. Although to actually give credit, there's more control here than most RTS campaigns. Usually there's a, oh, here's a few units, go kill everything, or, oh, this is how you press the A button. But this actually gives you a lot of tools right off the bat. But since this is Deathless, that's kind of remedied by the fact that it can only make an entire 3 squads and give them an entire 10 weapons. Woo. For now, our best early game option is going to be the Heavy Bolter. Since orcs at this stage are pretty much only going to use infantry, with the odd exception, going for the flamethrower, suicide, and the missile launchers are a bit whack. Anyways, the main strategy I used for this mission was one unit in particular. There's a bunch of Imperial Guard getting fucked all over the map, and although you can't control them after saving them, there is one exception. This Leman Russ tank, which, when you rescue, casually drops from 1855 health to 140 because I don't fucking know, game design. But fortunately, the servitors we start with can not only build structures, but can repair buildings and vehicles. You're going to see vehicles being repaired a lot throughout this run, but for the time being, at this stage a Leman Russ is fucking insanity. At 140 HP, sure, maybe something can nuke it down, but 2000? The orcs hardly pull off 3 damage per second against it. Unless you intentionally throw it for the sole purpose of committing suicide, you're not going to lose it. And it's pretty much game over for this mission. Except it actually wasn't. Since I have literally no use for plasma after building up my army at this stage, I forgot to build a plasma generator. And Gabriel was like, oh no, we don't have a plasma generator. We need to build those to fuck up the orcs. Commander, build a plasma generator, when the orcs are already all fucking dead. So just kinda sat there diddling my thumbs while Gabriel is just boasting how much a plasma generator is going to fuck up these orcs, and eventually we beat the map. Now we can move on to the second mission, Infiltration, where who would have guessed we have to infiltrate at the beginning. This beginning's a bit fucky because after the scout segment, which is already a bit scuffed as is, we gain access to this massive Space Marine force, but there's a lot of turrets here. They kind of killed my Space Marines really quickly, so what I had to do was abuse the turret's range and shoot them with my Heavy Bolters. But as you're going to see a lot in this run, precise micro of individual units is near fucking impossible. If you got a big ball of Marines in StarCraft and you want one to go over here, just click on the Marine and they'll go over there. Dawn of War, you just kinda have to sit there and pray to whatever gods may or may not exist that they don't run into oncoming fire by 15 fucking tanks, because in a theoretical scenario where they dodged every bullet it would be 0.4 seconds faster. And it only gets worse. Over time. Without end. Woo. Anyways, for this mission we have to get into a little bit of Warhammer lore. Orcs are very fond of consensual violence, and will refuse to attack their targets unless prompted. So if you actually never claim the strategic point right here, the orcs will never attack you. And with there being 3 strategic points behind you, you can actually theoretically get an infinite amount of resources before killing a single slugga boy, but we're not going to do that. Actually, let's talk about unlocks. We got the Skull Probe, a normally really good unit for picking out fights and trying to force engagements. Problem, it has timed life. It is entirely worthless. Fuck yeah, baby. On a slightly more useful note, we have armory upgrades, and now we can upgrade into missile launchers, add sergeants to squads, and have up to 4 weapons. Since the marine count when you make a squad is 4, you're never going to see any marine squads above or below 4 or 8 units until I get my apothecaries. We don't really have a whole lot of utility for the Space Marines based weaponry, so we're pretty much only going to be using heavy bolters and missile launchers. For that, it's actually better not to increase your squads at all, so there's less units that can die, microing is easier, and positioning isn't, it isn't this. Anyways, for the rest of this mission, remember that weird dance I did at the beginning where I had to abuse target range? We had to do that but with 2 fully developed orc bases. But now they also have killicons, which absolutely murder us if we don't have missile launchers, and also they make a fuck ton of units and there's a lot more turrets, and have I mentioned it's 2 fully developed orc bases? Look at this shit. I'm not even kidding, this isn't even a third of the orcs I killed, since I had to slowly creep inch by inch towards the orc base because these weapons require you to be stationary, and they have a setup time, so pretty much any time you want to utilize those sick heavy bolters or missile launchers, be prepared to press F2 for hold position and make your creeping as inconvenient as possible, because you have like a 1 or 2 second period where you can't attack anything, and if you can't attack anything you're going to get crumped, and if you get crumped you have to load an old save. Eventually though, we managed to creep our way to the end, get the last required orc structure down, and move on to the next mission, in which, by the gods, we have a savior from the squad-based bullshit. Firstly though, let's discuss some more squad-based bullshit. Here's the Imperial Guard. We start with them here and on quite a few maps, and despite being free units that respawn every few minutes to act as fantastic cannon fodder, they're just that. Pretty much any unit with a DPS output above 3 is going to melt through at least one of the 15 squad members, and we can't exactly have that. So you're really never going to see them in this playthrough. They'll usually be hiding in a corner, preferably behind a bunch of turrets so they don't spontaneously combust, which is actually really important by the way. One time I lost several minutes of agonizing progress only to find out one singular Marine died for whatever reason, and it wasn't a happy revelation. Anyways, back to what I was saying, our Lord and Savior is here, the Machine Cult. Vehicles in this game are going to be the most impactful upgrades we get for quite a while. They do a lot more damage, have a lot more variety, they're immensely tankier, and they can get repaired. Since we don't have apothecaries yet, this will be our only healing source in the entire game for quite a while, excusing natural regeneration of course. On this mission in particular, we unlock the Dreadnought and the Heavy Bolter turret. The turret is going to see extensive use throughout the entire run because it's the only thing we can spend money on in the late game to deal damage. And with its missile upgrade, it's pretty easy to get a massive defensive wall up, both to protect your fragile units and siege fortified positions. And because of the previously mentioned building rule, we don't really have to worry about protecting these as much and we can kind of expend them away. Although, if the occasion arises, we can repair them with servitors. And on a last rambly note, I don't know if some of the early game assaults would be defendable without the Heavy Bolter turret. Between their versatility between infantry and vehicles and their expendability, these are pretty much essential for your early game defense. The Dreadnought, however, is a lot easier to explain. This boxy boy has a staggering 3,800 hit points, which when compared to our other units, yeah, these things can take a beating. Granted, we can only get 3 of them in this mission, but hey, that's 3 dreadnoughts more than 0 dreadnoughts, and I really want dreadnoughts. Unfortunately for us though, this victory is short-lived because with the introduction of our vehicles comes the enemy's extended use of vehicles. And that means tanks. And if you know Warhammer lore, you would not only know that orcs don't believe in non-consensual aggression or fighting, but also that they're a wholehearted believer in hit-and-run tactics. I know it's an RTS, but the irony of the orcs being a big issue because they have a bunch of artillery tanks and keep hiding behind buildings and turrets, all the while slowly inching forward to prevent me from building my own turrets, is sadly hilarious, in the same way that a tragic car accident with your high school bully is hilarious. Oh yeah, also there's knockback in the game. Funny as all hell from a spectator's point of view. Not as funny when your own Marines go on a splish-splash adventure to the afterlife with no way of getting them out. Eventually though, after many reloads, we eventually killed all the orcs. The tanks are all gone. That means we can kill all their units with little to no opposition. Wait, why aren't we on the next mission? All the orcs are dead. I mean, there's a few tanks down here, but the mission just wants us to kill structure. Those motherfuckers. How was I supposed to know the orcs, the pacifistic, hit-and-run tactics, fun time race, is supposed to believe in fucking deception tactics and built an entire other base below my nose? Fucking hell. Anyways, this took another 20 minutes of me shoving my finger up my ass until the enemies decided to leave their base because God knows I wasn't killing another few dozen tanks. Then I went all in, hoping I could destroy their base before their vehicles could reach my inner perimeter of turrets, and we managed to do just that. And luckily there wasn't a 3rd base as I was dreading. And we can finally move on to the 4th mission. You want to see a good reason as to why this campaign wasn't played on Insane? Say hello to the Whirlwind Artillery Tank. This has a lot of really good upsides for this challenge, such as having a ridiculous range and can even fire without vision for those really nasty encampments utilizing short-range artillery. Problem? As you just saw, they do literally no damage. And to call them inaccurate is such an understatement that I literally looked at the script for 3 minutes trying to think of a clever idiom and I just couldn't. The good news is that with this vehicle's introduction we can now have a cap of up to 17, rather than the 7 we had in the last mission. With this we had 6 whirlwinds and 2 dreadnoughts, which did extremely well for the first orc clan, but the second one, Clan Orc Among Us, has a fucking squigoth. Remember how I said earlier that 3800 HP was a lot? Look at this fucker. If this isn't enough, there's a war boss in the area with not as blatantly high, but still ridiculously high HP. Also tanks. Lots, and lots, and lots, and lots, and lots of tanks. Oh, but don't you worry, we're not done here. To get into here, you have to go through this one bridge. This one narrow bridge that can be easily bombarded, not wide enough to support turrets, not long enough to abuse the whirlwind. The reinforcements go to the fucking bridge. And have I mentioned, there's a squigoth that one-shots us. What this meant was a lot of AI abuse and luck. Firstly, we need the squigoth to go away. This is where I would probably go, oh, so I used this unit in this position and this strategy to make the squigoth go away, but I couldn't tell you. I just loaded and saved and loaded and saved and kept bashing my head into the wall enough that I eventually just left. I don't know how. I couldn't replicate it if my life depended on it, but it's gone. Step 1, gone. Step 2, use our grossly inaccurate Whirlwind Artillery Tank to clear out all the production facilities. Remember how I said you don't have to have vision to attack with these bad boys? There's a bit of a catch to that. While they're even more inaccurate somehow when you're blind firing. So, In order to stay here for 3 hours, which by the way, that's a gross understatement, I was here for a lot longer, instead of 17, I needed to find a way to get vision. And since scouts fucking die immediately and skull probes don't even live past childbirth, I needed to do this with a structure. Problem, that's not a fucking option. You have to have a special place to put buildings that you can only get with certain buildings. But don't you fear, without these pylon power fields we can construct one of these buildings. The Stronghold. And these get really, really expensive. Easily more expensive than the literal last unit we unlock during the last missions, which require the latest game tech, and also require special objectives to be claimed. Do you see why spamming these is a really expensive issue? This is easily the most emotion I've put into a single video, and I'm almost glad it's this one. After many dead strongholds, we were finally able to get past this extremely cramped entrance and move forward to the slightly less cramped interior. The Whirlwinds were still doing their thing, but at this point we had no reliable way to kill the Squigoth, much less the war boss accompanying the Squigoth, and oh yeah, the fucking tanks. So we had to find a way to get to the high ground, which sadly wasn't just as easy as sending units up to the high ground and killing off the orcs and making a Star Wars reference and moving on to the next mission. No. We had to kill off this entire area over here, slowly build up a bunch of turrets surrounding the entrance, and then send up 4 of my tankiest units to be cannon fodder, stick around until they get low, run back, heal, repair, send them in again, go back, repair, send them in again, go back, repair, slow pusher advantage, send them in again, go back, repair, send them in again, one building at a time, fuck me. Eventually though, we did it. After a 17,000th fucking stronghold setup, we got a whole bunch of missile turrets to kill the Squigoth and the war boss. Luckily the war boss was pretty easy, having an aneurysm and going back and forth between missile fire until he fucking died. Wish I could say the same for myself. And something actually amazing happened on the Squigoth. I had everything set up to constantly bombard him with no repercussion, but I found out I actually beat the mission before he died. And that was because, funnily enough, the Whirlwind's incredible accuracy was so fucking terrible, it miraculously managed to kill the last building completely out of sight before it killed the thing I was specifically targeting and set up to kill. I mean, what the fuck can I even provide here? I literally can't. I spent over 5 hours meticulously planning a siege, and I beat it because my tanks fired so terribly, they won. Yep, yeah, no, fuck it, I'm getting a steak. I'll see you all when I get back. All the steak places were closed. I ended up getting Hardee's instead. Anyways, fortunately for us, the next mission is a very nice change of pace for the better. The orcs are no longer the primary enemy in this mission, and instead the Eldar are starting to be the bigger focus, with the only orc presence being an optional base you can destroy. But this mission gave us a lot of new additions that made this incredibly easy. Firstly, we start with 4 commander units, which is a lot more than the 2 we usually had, and makes the early game significantly easier. But for the late game we have 2 brand new additions. The Apothecary, which heals our infantry and their commander units, as well as not actually costing any infantry supply, as well as the Hellfire Dreadnought and an additional 3 vehicle slots to use, which means 2 more vehicles since 17 isn't divisible by 2. Neither is 7. Actually, why did they even give us 7 slots? I digress. Although this won't see continuous use throughout the run, it is a fantastic mid-range anti-infantry beast, and since this entire mission is almost nothing but infantry, getting our dreadnoughts up and running was more than enough to just completely decimate the Eldar presence. The only complication is that I miraculously managed to beat the final objective first, and I had to go all the way back and backtrack through an entire orc force, which was kind of annoying, but it was still just a simple A move to victory, and please, just let me have this. Anyways, the next mission was, fucking terrible. Firstly, it's massive. Really, really massive. Orc attacks spawn every few minutes with no possible way of getting rid of them, and worst of all, Eldar finally utilized their vehicles. The early game consisted of me just turtling up, getting our machine cults, and hiding behind a bunch of turrets, but there is one light in the darkness. That's that we start with 4 free Lehman Russ tanks. Remember that tank we had in the first mission? Although they're by no means an automatic win anymore, it made holding off the early waves much easier, and I only had to invest like 80% of my income to turrets rather than 95%. There is a small downside in the fact that we now have to babysit a bunch of squads that were never going to see combat. There were a few casualties before I took control of them, but rest assured the second I was able to, they went into this corner and nothing was ever injured again. Anyways, after, and I'm not even joking here, an hour of stalling, I finally got a good enough base defense and vehicle army that I felt comfortable moving out. This rather unsurprisingly did fairly well. Until we got to here. This base fucking sucks. Firstly, there are a bunch of grav platforms with anti-vehicle and anti-structure weapons that completely shred even our newly found Predator tanks. And we'll go more in depth with that in the next mission, but the key thing to note is that grav platforms count as infantry. Our counters to infantry are entirely non-existent for the time being because I had to spec all of my Predators into anti-vehicle. I'm sure as hell not going to be able to make any infantry here survive. Pushing with turrets is unviable because of their anti-structure damage. Same thing with dreadnoughts and Hellfire dreadnoughts. So we had to do basically the same thing we did in the last Orc mission, but luckily on a smaller scale. Granted, we did have to worry about very scary attack waves now, but I already knew this song and dance well enough to only get this down in an hour of constant micro and base building. And eventually, after much needed break-in between recordings, I was able to beat this mission and move on to a much worse one. Remember how I complained about the early game in the last mission? Now imagine that, but imagine if those early waves also had the possibility of coming with an avatar, a massive unit with several thousand HP that can do hundreds of damage per attack and can endure literal minutes of fire. Granted, we only need to do about 1,000 or 2,000 hit points of damage before it temporarily flees, but that still doesn't get rid of the fact that it fucking attacks us, and that meant lots and lots and lots of turtling. Luckily in this mission we do start off with access to the Predator tank, a very beefy vehicle that is inherently anti-infantry but can be upgraded into partial or fully anti-vehicle. And fortunately, once we got 2 or 3 of these, with supporting fire and micro, we can take down the avatar with ease, and once we got 4, we can completely decimate the first half of the mission and move on to the second half. This is one of the most infuriating RTS experiences I've ever had. So this map is divided into 2 quadrants with a big fuck-off river in the middle. And if we want to go to the second quadrant, we have to go through this bridge. Look at this fucking bridge fight. Look at the preparations I had to do to get past the bridge. Not the base, not the inner outskirts, not the main objective, the bridge. And although getting past this bridge took just as long as the Orc mission's bridge, unlike that mission, we also had to deal with constant attacks that can completely decimate my forces with complete ease, and yeah. And what's more, I actually found out a game-breaking bug. At times, if you save or an autosave happens while you're repairing a vehicle or structure, you can't repair that unit. Ever. With this, Predators are a lot less threatening with 200 HP rather than a few thousand, and eventually, this bug happened enough that all of my Predators were stuck with almost no health. And with all of them being specialized into anti-vehicle rather than anti-infantry, we had to completely restart the mission, and eventually, one good thing actually came to us. With our Predators being much more specialized against infantry, we can utilize the newly unlocked Terminators. Terminators are very bulky and heavy infantry that you can only unlock at the maximum tier of upgrades, as well as controlling relics across the map. Despite being very expensive and very late game units, they're extremely strong, and with our librarian's new ability that makes infantry temporarily invulnerable for a short time, as well as the apothecaries we already unlocked, we could finally push. But we weren't just going to slow push with turrets. There's too many grav platforms as well as infantry waves to make that a possibility. I decided that the only strategy that was going to help me here was a standard blitzkrieg, sending everything we have at once to secure a position at the bottom of the map as soon and as quickly as possible. This took a lot of tries to get right. Between having to micromanage my librarian's abilities, my 4th commander's newly unlocked orbital bombardment, making sure my apothecaries stay in the back lines and keeping my servitors on repair duty for the predators without endangering them, and also making sure my squads don't die, and it was a lot. A lot of micro, a lot of failure, but eventually we got to this position in which the second phase of the plan can begin. This was actually unintentional, but the Eldar send out attack waves to the bridge, which means if we keep our units out of sight, the units will never see us and they will push forward into the map. Once I found out this is how they worked, I set up one final push towards the main objective while the Eldar tried to regain control. I did also try to help out this process by doing that stronghold spam, but it wasn't too necessary, as with this flanking push we were finally able to defeat the Eldar, and we won't be seeing them again for a long while. And fortunately for us, the next mission was also incredibly easy. In this mission we still have our previously mentioned tanky predators, orbital bombardments, and terminators, but now we can also produce the Land Raider. The Land Raider is a very expensive and gated unit with a massive amount of HP, great anti-infantry and anti-vehicle weaponry, and as a cherry on top you can actually store a unit on this. Keyword on a unit, because for some reason I guess a singular servitor takes up the same amount of space as a fully decked out squad of 8 assault terminators, but regardless this allowed me to do some neat little micro tricks. Keep my terminator squads inside to set up for a massive push inside enemy lines, keep my servitors in there to keep them safe without worrying about enemy fire, as well as commander units in there if they get low or to keep them safe until a vital cooldown is available. With these strategies and how absurdly OP the Land Raider is, it was actually painfully simple to send them all in, clear out most of the army outside the chapel, send back my Land Raiders for repair, send them in again, and clear out everything. Although I was initially scared after this because I knew there was a flank coming from the Imperial Guard that was scripted after you cleared this objective, and I was concerned that I had to spend a bunch of time setting up turrets to fend off the ambush, but they don't exactly do a whole lot of damage, so we cleared them out with these, and we can move on to the next mission. Before starting this playthrough, there was one mission in particular I was the most scared about, and this was it. Firstly, we don't have access to our librarian anymore because he's turning to chaos. Although he's not gone yet, he's not available in any more missions. And we can't even make a replacement librarian, so those cool abilities that we were oh so loving in the last missions, yeah, we can just say goodbye to those. And now I get to explain why else this mission was fucking terrifying. There's one really good positive here: we do get free Leman Russ tanks. Well, the Leman Russes all start with 200 HP, and they have a maximum of 2000. And we don't really gain control of them until they hit max HP, and they generate about 5 HP a second, and that gives us a measly, 36 minutes to get all of our Leman Russes. Fan-fucking-tastic. Back to the negative side of things. This was another mission in which we could barely hold 2 strategic points. And since Land Raiders were basically required for our late game pushes, for reasons you're going to see later, we actually couldn't make any vehicles at all. Since we couldn't replace our vehicles, we had to rely on turrets, minefields, and our commander unit to deal with the early waves. Some of which are fucking scary, by the way. But luckily for us, after a certain threshold is met, your force commander lands to aid us. On the other side of the fucking map. I'm pretty sure the developers intended for this cutscene to be like, oh cool, now you can make 2 bases. But problem, that means we not only have to fortify 1, but 2 entire positions against unrelenting Chaos armies. And if you thought there was a simple way for these 2 armies to meet up, to, join forces, there isn't. You have to travel the entire fucking map and through all the enemy bases just to get your force commander with your forces. Cool. I guess for the fortunate side of things, you do start with 2 Terminator squads, and since you have servitors, you can just build up turrets. But it's still a massive inconvenience and something I'd just rather skip out on. So this took a lot of turtling and a lot of slow pushing. But here's the thing. Since the mission objective is to capture and control all 4 relics for a short time, the enemies are around the relics, fortify the relics, and are more than prepared to completely ruin your day and defend these relics with their lives. Here's the problem. You need relics for land raiders. What this meant was I had to sit here with my Tesco meal deal Terminators, slow push this entire side of the map, clear out an entire enemy base, set up turrets all over the fucking place so I can get rid of the attack waves which can easily kill my units, then do the same thing again on the high ground because keep in mind we're extremely vulnerable, make my Terminators stand AFK looking at a relic for long enough that we might be able to capture it, and then, and only then, after turtling, pain, and edging, we can finally build our land raiders. And even then it still wasn't necessarily a walk in the park because we still needed to kill all the Chaos bases. Well, we didn't need to, but with the enemy attack waves constantly oncoming, it was actually easier to do this rather than just defend. And with the Chaos having all their vehicles and most of their infantry available on this mission, with the only notable exception being their relic unit, the Bloodthirster, this wasn't exceptionally easy. But eventually, I cleared out all the bases and I got this melodramatic ending with this climactic, "Hold the line, men! We will defend with our lives against these fucking Chaos!" Well, absolutely nothing happened because all the Chaos is dead. I just fucking zoomed my camera in and out all over the place and gave all the Imperial Guardsmen bulked up weapons because fuck it. They sat in the timeout corner all mission like good soldiers, might as well give them a reward on the way home. And afterwards we can finally move on to the next mission, and I'm not one to usually condense an entire mission down for the sake of pacing. We can pretty much copy and paste the script from the last 2 missions and apply it here. The main difference is that we got our relics earlier, meaning overall less turtling, and although the existence of Bloodthirsters made the early game extremely weird and oddly micro-heavy, this mission wasn't really all that hard, just painfully time-consuming. That's because this mission objective is literally kill everybody and everything. The only interesting thing that happened is when the mission didn't end and I was like, oh no, I bet they set up a secret base while I was doing anything else. And then I discovered the late game army of devastation and truly a game over sequence if I ever seen one. An entire 1 plasma generator and 1 armory. Truly a threat to surpass Metal Gear. And after this is the last mission of the campaign, and one that is sadly enough for this video, painfully easy. Firstly, we start with allies, which although is heresy, do a pretty great job at stalling in the early game, and with support, can actually do a lot. They build pretty generally decent units. They're never going to win the mission on their own, but by God, they're going to do some fucking damage. And with their support, they allowed me to do some more greedy strategies and teching, until they decided to take every relic on the map. Who cares about the fact that they literally start with a relic? Who even needs land raiders anymore, LMAO? So Davey, I can hear you hypothetically asking, why didn't you reload? Well, surprisingly enough, these units weren't really needed. In this mission, the presence of vehicles is insanely low, and it's primarily just infantry. Sure, you'll see the occasional Predator, but you're really only going to be seeing Horror squads, Space Marine squads, Cultist squads, etc. So for this, just like the Eldar mission, we can actually just build 10 Dreadnoughts and deal with infantry fantastically and not have to worry about getting fucked over late game by vehicles. And eventually we managed to clear out all the units with our walking boxes of death, and then the main objective of this mission finally comes forth. We need to kill the Demon Prince, who has a massive amount of HP, hits like a complete truck, and is really fast. Usually in a standard playthrough, this boss is exceptionally easy. If you're dedicated enough and use your Force Commander wisely enough, you can actually beat this without building a unit. But on a Deathless playthrough, that's a little bit harder. For this, of course, I wanted to set up a position with as many heavy bolter turrets as humanly possible, and that was going great, until the Eldar came and aggroed the fucking boss, which, well, remember that war boss from all the way at the beginning of this video that just walked back and forth repeatedly and died from a fatal brain aneurysm? Well, the Demon Prince did just that, but through the entire map. I had every unit here, I had as many heavy bolter turrets as I could possibly need, but the Demon Prince was just not having it, and did whatever the fuck this is for 30 minutes, and honestly I didn't know how to stop him. Beating this boss, usually the most you'll ever see is that he gets really angry at one unit in particular, kills it, and just stays there. I've never seen this. But eventually he did whatever the fuck long enough that he just reset his leash range here? I don't know why here, there's literally nothing that makes this significant, but fuck it. That's actually really convenient because that is nowhere near his base, that is nowhere near his spawns, and that is nowhere he can really do anything. So I made a save, because I don't know why he's doing this, but whatever it is, I don't know if it's permanent, and if he goes towards my base, that is going to be really bad. I got all of my units, mobilized them towards the Demon Prince, and was thinking, can I just kill him outright without any turrets? So I began fighting him, and then I realized, whatever this leash point is, his leash range is exceptionally short, and that made this possible. And with that, with the entire planet destroyed, burnt to a desolate wasteland, and nearly all the population being slaughtered mercilessly, either by Orc, Eldar, or the forces of chaos themselves, I can say with confidence that I was the exception. Every soldier under my command got to live to tell the tale, and I beat Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War without losing a single unit. As always, thank you to my Patreon supporters who, for once, I'll actually go back to my old tendencies of insulting them and replace their Patreon title with something really mean. Haha, take that you doo-doo heads, I bet you're really riled up now. Anyways, I hope you're doing well. If you got it this far through the video, thank you for watching. I hope you're taking care of yourself and life is going along just fine. And as always, stay frosty, my friends.